Hello friends, watch my story till end. And don't forget to subscribe. My name is Arthur Hale, and what I'm about to tell you is not fiction, not exaggeration, not a story polished for sympathy. It is my real life. For 8 long years, I lived like a servant under the roof of my own son. I slept on a thin cot in the damp shadows of his basement. I scrubbed his floors, his sinks, his toilets, tasks I never thought I would be reduced to in my old age. After losing everything to bankruptcy and finding myself wandering the streets with no home to return to, he offered me a room. But that space wasn't a room. It was a storage cell with concrete walls and a smell that never truly left. He told me I could stay, but only if I earned it. And so I did. Every sunrise began with his wife placing a neatly written list of chores in my hand, as if I were the household staff they couldn't be bothered to hire. Cooking, cleaning, yard work, washing their cars, I did it all. And when guests came over, they didn't introduce me as Arthur, or father, or even family. No, they called me the helper. Imagine being reduced to that word by the very child you once held against your chest. But here's the twist life didn't warn them about. One ordinary day, my son saw me on television, and in that single moment, his perfect world cracked straight down the middle. You won't believe where this story goes from here. Before I unfold the rest, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. This journey deserves witnesses. I never expected to end my life this way. Years ago, I ran a small but successful manufacturing company. Nothing huge, but decent enough to keep my family comfortable. I paid for my son's engineering degree, bought us a nice home, gave him everything I could so he'd never struggle the way I once did. And then, the economy imploded. My biggest clients filed bankruptcy, and their unpaid invoices dragged me down with them. I fought like a man drowning with no shore in sight. Loans, second mortgages, sleepless nights, tried to keep my employees paid and my business alive. But there's a moment in every collapse when you see it clearly. The fight is already lost. Within 2 years, everything I spent decades building turned to dust. The bank took my house, the cars, everything that wasn't nailed down. Overnight, I went from a man running a company to a man standing in line at a shelter. My son was in his last year of college when the collapse hit, and I hid the truth from him. I told him things were fine. I didn't want him carrying my failures or sacrificing his future to rescue me. So while he studied and rose into a world of bright possibilities, I drifted downward into a darkness I didn't know how to escape. I bounced between cheap motels and terrible apartments, working whatever minimum wage jobs I could get with my age-worn hands. Eventually, after months of drowning in unpaid rent, I lost even those places. I slept in my car until winter forced me into crowded shelters. At 70 years old, I found myself standing in soup lines beside strangers who had also lost everything. I told no one, until the day someone recognized me at a shelter and whispered my name to my son. He called me that same evening. His voice shook, not with worry, but with shock. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, and I remember my eyes filling even before I could answer. I told him the truth. I was ashamed. I didn't want him to see me broken. He said he was coming to get me. When he arrived, I climbed into his car, feeling something I had not felt in months: relief. I thought he was rescuing me because I was his father, because blood mattered, because he couldn't bear to see me suffer. When he pulled into the driveway of his huge house, polished windows, trimmed lawn, the kind of home I once dreamed of providing for him, I whispered, "I'm proud of you, son." I meant it, every word. If only I had known. I wasn't being brought home. I was being hired. The room he gave me wasn't a bedroom at all. It was a cold storage space in the basement. No window, no heat, just a cot and a plastic dresser. The smell of damp cement clung to the air. I told myself it was temporary. A few days, maybe a week. The next morning, his wife walked in without knocking and placed that list of chores in my hand. She said, "This is what you'll do daily to stay here." Her voice was steady, rehearsed, even. It was clear they had discussed this. I looked at the long list and felt something inside me sink. Cook all meals. Clean every bathroom. Do the laundry. clean the floors, do the grocery runs, wash the cars, mow the lawn, maintain the yard. Every single day. I remember whispering, "Are you serious?" She didn't blink. She simply said, "If you don't like it, the shelters are still open." My son came down afterward to clarify expectations. He stood there, arms crossed, explaining how I should earn my keep because I was living rent-free. His voice was cold, professional, the tone you use when dismissing an employee, not speaking to the man who raised you. I wanted to tell him I was looking for a job, that once I found work, I could pay rent like anyone else. But he didn't care about that. What he cared about was having free labor. And so began the years that followed. Hate-haunting, suffocating years. Years where I was not a father, not family, not even human in their eyes. Just the helper, a title sharper than any blade. But God has a strange way of flipping destinies. They never imagined the servant in their basement would one day hold a secret powerful enough to shatter everything. And that day came sooner than they expected. For 8 years, the sun rose for everyone in that house long after it rose for me. My day began in the chill of dawn, when the rest of the world was still dreaming. I dragged myself from that hard cot, feeling the ache in my back before my eyes were even fully open. The basement floor was always cold, icy in winter, damp in summer, and the air carried a smell that never left, no matter how many times I scrubbed the place. I moved through the dark by muscle memory, find my shoes, tighten the laces, climb the stairs quietly so the family wouldn't hear me. My job was to make breakfast, not for myself, never for myself, but for them. I made eggs exactly the way his wife liked them, whisked until the color turned mellow and airy. I poured coffee strong enough to satisfy my son after his morning workouts. I laid out the children's plates with fruit cut into delicate shapes because their mother wanted it to look presentable. Then I stepped aside and watched from a distance while they ate. I wasn't permitted to sit at their table, not even on a birthday or a holiday. After they finished, I gathered their plates and ate whatever scraps were left behind. Some mornings, it was a few bites of toast. Some mornings, nothing at all. I would rinse the cold plates slowly, letting the water disguise the sting behind my eyes. Then came the real work. Bathrooms first, 4 of them, each needing to look spotless, as if a hotel cleaning team had been assigned to them. I scrubbed until my fingers burned and my knuckles cracked. His wife would walk in behind me, her finger gliding along the counter or the tiles. If she found the faintest smear of water, the smallest speck of dust, she'd say, "Again," and walk out without another word. Laundry was next. Mountains of it. Clothes tossed carelessly, towels damp from showers, sheets from beds I was not allowed to enter. I washed, dried, folded everything into perfect stacks. She never thanked me, not once. If anything was folded slightly differently from how she preferred, she'd unfold it and drop it back in the basket. I swallowed the humiliation again and again, until the bitter taste became familiar. After lunch prep and cleanup came yard work. Summer meant mowing under the blistering sun while beads of sweat rolled down my back. Winter meant shoveling snow while my hands stiffened from cold. In autumn, I hauled heavy bags of fallen leaves across the lawn. In spring, I dug into the soil to plant flowers that weren't mine to enjoy. Afternoons blurred into evenings. I washed their expensive cars, the ones my son bought with the money I once hoped he'd use responsibly. If the sun caught even the smallest streak on a windshield, he'd nod toward me with that cold, businesslike expression and say, "Fix it." Dinner had to be ready at precisely 6 o'clock. Not 5:58. Not 6:02. 6 sharp. I learned to time everything down to the second. Roast chicken, rice, pasta, vegetables. I made meals that filled their home with aromas I was not invited to share. They sat together, laughing or discussing their day while I hovered out of sight. I stood in the kitchen waiting for them to finish so I could clear the plates and eat what remained. If guests came over, I became part of the scenery. I refilled drinks, carried trays, and smiled politely when introductions were made. "This is the helper," my son would say. Not father, not dad, Not even Arthur. No title, except the one he felt erase my blood from his. Some guests would nod politely, offering the shallow smile people give to those they believe beneath them. Others didn't bother looking at me at all. I became invisible by force. The cruelest part, however, was the children. My own grandchildren grew up believing I was nothing more than an old man hired to clean the house. They call me Arthur. Never Grandpa. Never anything affectionate. And I was forbidden to correct them. We don't want to confuse them, my son had said coldly. It's better this way. Better for whom? Certainly not for me. At night, after everyone went to sleep, I slipped back down into the basement like a shadow that didn't belong upstairs. My cot groaned under my weight. My bones did too. I lay there in darkness, listening to the soft hum of the water heater and the distant sounds of a family that had forgotten me. That was my world. Day after day, year after year. What kept me alive wasn't hope for kindness from them, because that hope had died quickly. It was something much smaller, much quieter, something they didn't even notice. Coins. Loose change left on counters and dressers. Quarters that slipped from pockets. Nickels and dimes overlooked on the floor. They thought nothing of them. To them, those coins were worthless. To me, they were a heartbeat. Every night, I collected the coins in secret. I never took bills or anything they would notice, only what they abandoned without thought. I stored them in a sock hidden beneath my cot, a place nobody ever bothered to check. When the sock grew heavy enough, I did something they would have mocked me for. I bought a lottery ticket. Each Wednesday, I walked 2 miles to a small corner store with my stolen moments of hope jingling in my pocket. The walk was long and painful. My knees ached, my back throbbed, but I made that journey as if my life depended on it. In a way it did. The store clerk, a kind young man with a gentle way of speaking, always greeted me like he was happy to see me. That alone felt like a miracle. He asked how I was, and I always lied. I'm fine. He had no idea of the life I returned to once I left his store. For 3 years, I bought a single lottery ticket every Wednesday. For 3 years, I lost. And yet, I never stopped. Those tickets were more than a gamble. They were proof that I hadn't completely surrendered. They were tiny rebellions, quiet bursts of hope, seeds I planted in the darkness. The family never questioned where I went. My son assumed I was stretching my legs. His wife assumed I needed air. Neither cared enough to ask. They thought they controlled every corner of my existence, but they didn't see the one place I kept hidden, my hope. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Wednesday. The house was filled with voices. My son had invited clients over for dinner. I'd spent the entire day cooking, preparing, setting the table with the care of a man polishing chains. After serving them, I stood in the kitchen, scraping grease from pans. My hands moved automatically while my mind drifted, tired and numb. From the living room, I heard laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of their television. At 9 o'clock sharp, the lottery drawing began. The sound reached me faintly, like a whisper slipping through the doorway. Normally, I didn't listen. Losing had become routine. But that night, something made me pause. Just for a moment. Just long enough. The announcer read the first number. It matched mine. A coincidence, I told myself. The second number matched. A tremor spread through my hands. The third number matched. I stopped washing the pan. Water ran over my fingers, turning warm to cold. The fourth number matched. My heart beat so hard I thought it might stop. The fifth. My legs nearly gave out. And then, the sixth. 6 numbers. All mine. No mistakes. I looked at my ticket, then back at the TV, then at my ticket again. I read each number until my eyes blurred. I steadied myself on the counter, feeling the weight of 8 years shift inside my chest. $4 million. 4 million. I stood in that immaculate kitchen, wearing my son's discarded shirt, scrubbing his dishes, and realized I was holding the ticket that would end my servitude. I was clutching freedom. Freedom I bought with coins. I folded the ticket carefully and slipped it back into my pocket, my hands trembling so fiercely I feared they might give me away. The party continued in the living room. Laughter, wine, conversation, while I cleaned silently with a miracle burning against my chest. When everyone went to sleep, I descended into the basement one last time as a servant, but for the first time as a man with power. I lay on my cot, staring into the dark, unable to sleep. I touched the ticket again and again, as if it might vanish if I let it go. But it didn't vanish, and neither did the truth. No matter how much they took from me, no matter how they buried me, I was about to rise from the basement they trapped me in. My freedom had a date, and it was approaching fast. The days that followed my silent victory felt unreal, as if my body still lived in that basement, but my spirit had already stepped outside its walls. I went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, scrubbing, just as I always had, but everything felt different now. Every chore was a countdown. Every command from my son's wife felt like a reminder of the freedom blooming quietly in my pocket. I didn't dare act differently. Servants aren't supposed to smile. Servants aren't supposed to hope. So I kept my face still. I kept my back bent. I kept my voice quiet. But inside me, a storm was waking. 2 days after I submitted the ticket for verification, I received the call. The lottery commission informed me that my claim was legitimate, the ticket was authentic, and because the jackpot exceeded $1 million, I was required to attend a public award ceremony. Live televised coverage. Reporters. Cameras. For a moment, I felt my chest seize with fear, because I knew exactly what a televised ceremony meant. It meant my son and his wife would find out. It meant the entire illusion they'd built, of me as their voiceless, helpless servant, would crumble in front of every person who ever looked down on me. I asked the commission quietly if there was any way to collect the prize privately. Their answer was gentle, but firm. No. Large jackpots must be claimed publicly. I thanked them, hung up the phone, and stared at the basement wall for several minutes. My breath shook. My hands trembled. I was frightened, not of the money, not of the cameras, not of attention. I was frightened of the confrontation coming my way. 8 years of swallowed rage doesn't disappear. It boils. It roars. It waits. But I knew there was no turning back now. The world would know. And so would they. I needed clothes, real clothes, not the faded shirts and worn pants my son discarded like trash. The lottery office gave me a small advance for immediate needs, and with it, I took the bus to a thrift shop. I stood in front of a cracked mirror, wearing a clean button-down shirt and a pair of slacks that actually fit. I almost didn't recognize myself. After 8 years in rags, seeing myself presentable felt like a forgotten luxury. I got a haircut from a cheap barbershop down the street. When the barber brushed the loose hair from my shoulders and handed me the mirror, I froze. I looked like a man again, not the ghost lingering in someone else's basement. On the morning of the ceremony, I left the house early. My son's wife barely glanced up when I said I had an appointment. She didn't care what I did as long as the chores got done. I walked out the front door without knowing it was the last time I'd leave that house as their servant. The lottery commission building felt surreal. Bright, polished floors, smiling officials, the hum of excitement in the air. They ushered me into a waiting area with other winners, people wearing expensive watches and tailored suits. I sat among them quietly, feeling out of place, yet not unwelcome. When my name was called, the cameras flashed before I even stepped onto the stage. A large ceremonial check awaited me. My name printed boldly, clearly, undeniably. For $1 million. The lights shone hot on my face, but for once, the heat didn't burn. It illuminated. Reporters asked what I planned to do with the money. I answered with small, careful words. I'm grateful, I said simply. This will change my life. Nobody there knew how deeply those words ran. When the ceremony ended, the official handed me paperwork, smiled warmly, and said, "Your funds will be transferred within a few days." I thanked her, holding the documents like they were fragile. Then I walked out into the sunlight, blinking as the brightness met my skin, the same skin that had grown used to the basement's gloom. That evening, the ceremony aired on the 6 o'clock news. I knew exactly where my son would be. I knew his evening routine. I knew the television would be on. I returned to the house before the broadcast and went to the basement to fold a load of laundry. My hands shook as I worked, but my breathing stayed steady. I could hear the faint sound of the television upstairs. Then the news anchor's voice echoed through the floorboards. A local man has won the $4 million lottery jackpot. My heart pounded like fists against a locked door. Then it happened. Footsteps thundered across the ceiling. A voice shouted. A sharp, furious sound that sliced through the quiet. What the hell? The basement door flew open so violently it slammed against the wall. My son stormed down the stairs, his face twisted with disbelief, shock, and something darker. He held his phone inches from my face. On the screen was my picture from the ceremony, smiling beneath that oversized check. He screamed, "What the hell is this, Dad? Dad!" He hadn't called me that in 8 years. I looked at the screen slowly, then at him. "Yes," I said calmly. "That's me." His eyes bulged. His voice cracked. "You won $4 million. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?" I met his anger with stillness. "It was none of your concern." He froze. His wife appeared in the doorway behind him, her mouth hanging open. Her eyes darted between the photo and my face like she couldn't comprehend the two were the same person. "That's really you?" she whispered. "Yes." Her shock lasted only a moment. Then her face softened into a smile so sweet it made my stomach turn. The same woman who barked orders at me daily now spoke like honey dripping from her tongue. "Oh my goodness, congratulations. This is wonderful news." Her warmth was fake, transparent, desperate. My son tried to calm himself. He straightened his posture, forced a smile, and said, "We're so happy for you, Dad." The word "dad" slipped from his mouth like a calculated trick, not affection. 8 years of silence, 8 years of contempt, 8 years of degrading labor, suddenly erased by the smell of money. They ushered me upstairs, insisting we talk as a family. His wife offered tea, speaking with sugary politeness that made my skin crawl. She talked about helping me manage my finances, about how dangerous the world was for lottery winners, about how people might try to take advantage of me. I almost laughed. If only she saw the irony. My son joined in, nodding eagerly. He said I should stay with them, that they'd help me invest properly, that I shouldn't make hasty decisions. Their plan was obvious. They wanted my money. They wanted control. They wanted access. But they didn't realize something crucial. I had come prepared for this moment. I let them talk. I let them pretend. I let them rewrite 8 years of cruelty into a story of family support. Then I stood up slowly. Silence thickened the room. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I said quietly, "and neither of you will ever see a penny." It felt like dropping a bomb. My son's smile cracked instantly. His wife's face twisted with offense. "What do you mean you're leaving?" he demanded. I looked at him with the calm of a man who has waited 8 years to speak. "This house," I said, "was never a home to me. It was a workplace, a prison, and both of you were my jailers." His wife gasped. My son tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "For 8 years, you made me scrub your floors, wash your toilets, serve your meals, and sleep in a storage room like I wasn't your father. You called me the helper. You hid me from my own grandchildren. You stripped me of dignity." My son stammered. "We gave you shelter." "No," I cut him off. "You gave me labor, and you took advantage of my desperation." His wife snapped. "You're being ungrateful." I turned to her slowly. "Ungrateful?" My voice was steady, but my words shook the air. "You treated me like I was nothing, and now you expect gratitude because I didn't die in your basement." She opened her mouth again, but I continued. "I'm buying my own home. I'm reclaiming my life. And from now on, you can clean your own toilets." The silence that followed was heavy, angry, stunned, ugly. Then the desperation arrived. "You can't do this," she hissed. "We'll take legal action." You'll do nothing," I said firmly, "because I owe you nothing. And if you try to claim otherwise, I will tell everyone the truth." His face paled. Hers reddened. The truth was the one weapon they could not defeat. I walked to the basement that night with my shoulders straighter than they had been in 8 years. I slept lightly, knowing dawn would bring a new chapter of my life. The next morning, I packed my few belongings, called a taxi, and left the keys on the kitchen counter with a note. "Thank you for 8 years of servitude. I will never forget what you did." I stepped out of that house and felt the world expand around me. The air tasted different, cleaner, sharper, free. And behind me, the door shut on a chapter one would never reopen. The taxi ride away from that house felt unreal at first. My belongings, barely enough to fill 2 plastic bags, rested beside me on the seat, swaying gently with every turn. After 8 years of isolation in a concrete basement, even the passing scenery looked foreign. Sunlight flickered through the windows, warm on my face, and for once, I didn't feel the urge to hide from it. When the driver asked where I was headed, I gave the address of a modest hotel across town. He glanced at the bags and then at me, sympathy softening his eyes. If only he knew the truth. If only he knew those bags held the remnants of a life that had been stolen from me, and that the man sitting in his back seat had for a million reasons to finally breathe freely. When we pulled up to the hotel, I stepped out and felt weightless, not because I was free of the chores or the cold basement or the humiliation, but because for the first time in nearly a decade, I had something that belonged to me alone: control. Control over my destiny. Control over my name. Control over the story they tried to erase. Inside the hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, a real bed with a real mattress, and allowed myself a moment of silence. The room smelled faintly of detergent and fresh linens. The floor didn't creak. The air wasn't damp. There were no footsteps overhead, no list of chores waiting on a table, no cold voice commanding me back into servitude. The quiet was overwhelming. For a long time, I simply sat there, hands trembling, not from fear, but from disbelief. I wasn't in the basement anymore. Nobody could barge in to inspect my work. Nobody could summon me with a shout. Nobody controlled my waking hours or dictated my purpose. The silence felt sacred. The next 2 weeks passed like a dream. The lottery funds arrived, and for the first time in years, I saw a bank balance that didn't make my stomach twist with dread. I looked at that number, large, impossibly large, and felt an ache rise in my chest. I thought about what I had endured, about the years that had been stripped from me, and about how different things could have been if my son had chosen compassion instead of cruelty. But the past was done. Now was my turn to choose. I didn't need a mansion. I didn't need luxury. I didn't want anything that resembled the world my son lived in. What I craved was simple, a place where I could wake up without fear, a place where my name meant something again. I found a single-story home in a quiet neighborhood 2 towns over. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. A small front yard, a garden area, a garage, a sunlit living room with windows that actually opened. It felt peaceful the moment I stepped inside. I bought it outright, furnished it with comfortable pieces, and stood in the bedroom staring at the bed, soft, warm, inviting. That first night in my own home, I fell asleep wrapped in a blanket that didn't smell of mildew or cold concrete. I slept deeply, without waking to the sound of footsteps or the hum of machinery. In the morning, I made breakfast for myself, eggs cooked the way I liked them, and I ate at my own table with the sun spilling gently across the wood. Freedom tastes different, richer, heavier, real. It wasn't long before I began thinking of others who carried the same invisible weight I once carried. Elderly men and women thrown aside, forgotten, struggling to survive without support. I remembered the shelter where I stayed, the shivering bodies, the exhausted faces, the quiet despair of people who no longer had a place in the world. I knew their pain too well, so I made a decision. I donated a significant portion of my winnings to organizations supporting senior homelessness and job programs for older adults. I didn't announce it. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to create something good out of the hell that nearly broke me. Every dollar I gave felt like a silent scream turned into a prayer, a way of saying, "You cannot erase us. We matter. Our lives are not over." Then came the matter of my grandchildren. For 8 years, they had passed me in the hallways without knowing who I was. They had played in the yard while I mowed the lawn behind them. They had eaten meals I cooked while I stood in the kitchen waiting for scraps. And they thought I was nobody. I could have walked away from them forever, just as their parents walked away from me. But they were children. They weren't the architects of my suffering. They had been fed a lie and accepted it because they didn't know any better. So I reached out, gently, carefully. I asked to meet them with the help of a relative who understood what had been done to me. The first time they saw me outside the house, standing tall, wearing clean clothes, something shifted in their eyes. They looked confused, curious, hopeful. I sat with them and told them the truth. Not cruelly, not with bitterness, but with honesty. I told them I was their grandfather. I told them I'd always loved them, even when I wasn't allowed to show it. They were quiet at first, trying to piece together a world they didn't know existed. Over time, they opened up. They asked questions. They wanted stories. They wanted memories. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, we built a bond that had been stolen from us. I promised myself one thing. They would never inherit the cruelty of their parents. I created college funds for them that bypassed my son entirely. The money would go to them directly when they turned 18. Not a penny could be touched by the people who imprisoned me. I made sure of that. Then the calls began. My son's number appeared on my phone again and again. Messages poured in, long apologies, short apologies, emotional apologies, desperate apologies. Voicemails filled with promises to make things right. He said he regretted everything. He said he was ashamed. He said he wanted to be a better son. But every word fell hollow. Not because I couldn't believe in forgiveness, but because he only found regret once he realized the consequence. If I had remained poor, he wouldn't have apologized. If I had remained in his basement, he wouldn't have cared. His remorse was for himself, not for the wounds carved into me. So I blocked his number. I refused to read his emails. I ignored every attempt he made to reach me. I had given him my silence for 8 years as a servant. Now I gave him silence as a free man. He drove to my new house once, hoping to confront me. I called the police and watched through the window as officers escorted him away. He looked smaller that day, shrunk by the weight of the truth he tried to bury. Eventually, he stopped trying. Perhaps he finally understood. Perhaps not. It didn't matter anymore. I had reclaimed something far more precious than vengeance. My dignity. Years passed. Peace settled over my life like a soft blanket. I gardened in the mornings, read in the afternoons, volunteered at the shelter on weekends. I saw my grandchildren often. They grew. They laughed. They hugged me with the sincerity children naturally possess. One afternoon, as I sat in my backyard watching the sunlight filter through the trees, I realized something. I was happy. Not wealthy happy. Not revenge happy. Simply free. At 78, I should have been tired, broken, worn down by what life had thrown at me. But I felt lighter than I had in decades. My soul breathed again. I had walked through humiliation, through loss, through betrayal, through darkness, and yet here I was, alive, standing, whole. The basement was gone. The servant was gone. The past was gone. Only the man remained. A man with a name. A man with freedom. A man who proved that even after 8 years in the shadows, you can still reclaim the light. And that is how my story truly ends. I was once the help of my own son's home. Then one day, he saw me on television, with the world watching, and remembered I was his father. But by then, it was far too late. Some wounds can heal. Some bonds can mend. But certain betrayals etch themselves so deeply into the soul that not even time can erase them. I am free now, and I will never again serve anyone who doesn't know how to love. Sometimes life doesn't break you with one violent blow. Sometimes it breaks you slowly, piece by piece, day by day, until you wake up one morning and realize the person staring back at you in the mirror is only a fraction of who you once were. For 8 years, I lived in the shadows of a home built by my own sacrifices. A basement became my world. Servitude became my routine. Silence became my language. And the people I loved the most became the architects of my suffering. But even in the darkest corners of despair, a seed of hope can survive. A handful of forgotten coins. A walk to a dusty corner store. A ticket printed with numbers no one else cared to notice. And suddenly, everything changes. Not because fate finally shows mercy, but because you refuse to stop dreaming, even when dreaming felt pointless. My son saw me on television long before he ever saw my pain. He remembered the word dad, only when money forced it back into his mouth. But this story was never about revenge. It was about rebirth. It was about a man rediscovering the worth he had forgotten. A man reclaiming the dignity stripped from him. A man standing up after 8 years on his knees and saying, "I am done being small. I did not win $4 million merely to escape abasement. I want my life back, my voice, my freedom, my name. And in the end, that is worth more than any amount of money." So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Even when the world calls you worthless, even when your own blood turns against you, even when the walls close in and the air grows thin, hold on to the smallest spark. Protect it. Feed it. Because one day, that spark might ignite a fire powerful enough to burn through every chain holding you down. This was my true story, the story of a father buried in silence. In the moment he rose again. If you felt even a flicker of emotion in these words, don't leave without subscribing, because some stories deserve to be remembered, and some wounds deserve to be witnessed.